Today, we're going to decode a hidden pattern that pretty much governs everything from your own personal growth to massive global crises. It's this universal rhythm of change, and I promise you, once you see it, you are going to start noticing it everywhere. Let's dive in. So, have you ever wondered about this? It's a really fundamental question, right? Things can seem perfectly fine, totally stable for years, even decades, and then, boom, seemingly out of nowhere, everything changes. To see what I mean, let's look at a few examples you'll definitely get. Okay, think about growing up. That shift from the pretty stable world of childhood into the chaos of being a teenager. It's not some smooth, gradual process, is it? Nope, it's this intense period of total reorganization, where everything just feels way more sensitive and, frankly, up for grabs. And this same pattern scales up. You see it in entire societies. A country can look peaceful, maybe even unchanging for a generation. But underneath all that calm, pressures can be building and building until one little event can trigger a massive revolution. We even see it on a planetary scale. The Earth's climate can hang out in a relatively stable state for thousands of years, and then it can cross a threshold that leads to these incredibly rapid, dramatic shifts that affect every single one of us. So we have all these different names for these moments, right? You've heard them. Tipping points, sensitive periods, phase shifts. But the theory we're digging into today argues that these are all just different pieces of the same, much bigger puzzle. What we've been missing is one single theory that connects them all. Well, until now. To really get a handle on change, we actually have to start by understanding stability. What's the invisible architecture that holds a system, any system, together in a steady state? So the theory has a bit of a fancy name for this architecture, a constraint closure regime. Now, that sounds complicated, but all it really means is you have a system where all the different parts are constantly supporting and reinforcing each other. They create this closed loop that actively works to keep things stable. The absolute best way to picture this is to think of a freshly built Jenga tower. It's solid, right? Each block is a constraint on the others, and they all work together to keep that tower standing tall. That right there is a self-contained, stable system. A perfect little picture of a constraint closure regime. Okay, so if these regimes are so stable, so good at holding themselves together, how on earth does anything ever change? Well, that brings us to the absolute core idea of this whole framework. These special moments when the structure loosens up and transformation suddenly becomes possible. And this is where we get the metastable window. This isn't the change itself, and this is key. It's the super important period before the change happens. It's this temporary interval where that self-reinforcing loop of constraints gets weaker, making the whole system kind of wobbly and wide open to new influences. So what does a system actually look and feel like when it's in one of these windows? Well, there are three key signs to watch for. First, you'll see a lot more variability. Things get more erratic, more unpredictable. Second, you see reduced resilience. The system just doesn't bounce back from small hits the way it used to. And third, there's this heightened sensitivity, where tiny little pushes can suddenly have massive effects. Let's go back to our Jenga tower for a second. The metastable window is that point in the game where the tower is getting really shaky. You know the feeling. It hasn't fallen over yet, but you know that one wrong move could bring the whole thing crashing down, or maybe even shift it into some new, weird shape. It's a moment of serious vulnerability, yeah, but it's also a moment of pure potential. And it is so important to get the difference between this and a tipping point. A tipping point is the specific moment of collapse. That's the single threshold you cross. A metastable window is the entire wobbly period of time that leads up to it. It's that whole interval of opportunity and vulnerability where the future is basically hanging in the balance. So let's put all the pieces together. We have these stable periods, right? And we have these windows of transformation. And when you string them together, you get this beautiful universal pattern of change, what the theory calls a cascade. Here it is, the pattern in its simplest form. A system kicks off in a stable state. That's our constraint closure regime. Then, different pressures open up a metastable window, which creates this period of instability. From there, the system can either snap back to its old state, or, more often, it transforms into a completely new stable regime. And then, the whole cycle just starts all over again. All right, this visual basically puts the entire theory into one picture. You can see the stable regimes kind of stacked on top of each other.
The jump between them happens through that fiery red area in the middle. That's our metastable window. But hey, look at the arrows on the right. They show us something absolutely critical. A change in one system, like the climate, can actually trigger a cascade in a totally different one, like a social system. It turns out everything is connected.
Look, this framework is way more than just an interesting idea. Learning to actually spot these windows of change has huge real-world implications. It gives us a completely new lens for understanding both massive opportunity and incredible risk. This quote right here, it just gets to the absolute heart of it. If you want to create change, I don't care if it's in healthcare, education, or global policy, when you act can be just as important, if not more important, than what you do. Trying to push for change during a stable period is like pushing on a solid brick wall. But intervening during a metastable window, that's like pushing on a door that's already swinging open. So let's just lock in the 4 biggest takeaways here. First, timing is everything. The right move at the right moment can change the entire outcome. Second, variability is a signal. When a system starts to get wobbly and unpredictable, it's basically telling you a transformation might be just around the corner. Third, these windows are about possibility, not certainty. They open a door, but what's on the other side isn't guaranteed. And finally, no system is an island. A shift in one area can trigger cascades you would never expect. I mean, just think about the applications for a second. In public health, this could help us figure out the exact moment when a person is most ready to make a healthy change. In education, it helps explain why some periods, like adolescence, are just so critical and formative. And for giant challenges like climate change, it's a pretty stark warning. Pushing a system into one of these windows could have cascading consequences we just can't predict. So I'll leave you with this thought. Now that you have this new mental model, where do you see these windows opening? What systems in your own life, in your community, or in the world at large feel really stable? And maybe more importantly, which ones feel a little bit wobbly, like they're poised for a really profound transformation?